The jungle felt like it was dying right along with us. All around, trees were getting shredded, leaves exploding into dust, and the ground shaking from gunfire. There were 12 of us Navy SEALs, the best America had, and we were pinned down hard in a kill zone that was turning into our grave by the second. I pressed my back against a slick, moss-covered log, trying to make my 6-foot body disappear into the earth. It felt useless. Rounds ripped through the branches over my head like the jungle itself was being fed into a wood chipper. My radio crackled in my ear, thick with panic and static. "Ghost 6, this is Ground Team Alpha. We need air support right now. We need a quick reaction force. We need anything you can send. We are getting slaughtered out here." I already knew the answer before it came back. "Ground Team Alpha, negative on air assets. Weather is too heavy. Quick reaction force is 35 minutes out. You need to hold your position." 40 minutes. I almost laughed. We would be lucky to last 10. Up until that moment, the mission had gone exactly by the book. The briefing said the compound would have maybe 20 hostile fighters. Light resistance. Go in fast, grab what we needed, and be gone before the sun fully came up. Clean and simple. Except it was all wrong. The compound had been a setup. A perfect one. Now we were surrounded by what looked like a full battalion of fighters. These were not amateurs. They moved with discipline, used cover smartly, and coordinated their fire like professionals. They were well-trained, well-equipped, and they knew exactly how to kill us. "Chief," Daniel yelled, barely audible over the chaos. "Movement on the left side. They are trying to wrap around us." I ran the numbers in my head without even thinking about it. 12 of us, ammunition running low, against an enemy that just kept coming, wave after wave with guns that never seemed to run dry. The math was ugly, simple, final. We were going to die in that miserable jungle, half a world away from home, and there would be nothing anyone could do about it. I keyed my radio again, forcing my voice to stay steady. "Ghost 6, Ground Team Alpha. If you have anything left to give us, anyone at all nearby, now would be a really good time." Silence followed, long enough for hope to fade. Then a new voice slid into my ear. I'd never heard it before. It was female, young, calm in a way that cut through the noise like cold water. "Ground Team Alpha, I have your location. I am inbound. Tell your men to keep their heads down. Things are about to get interesting." I blinked. Who is this? Someone who does not miss. Before I could say another word, the jungle cracked with a sound I knew well. The sharp, unmistakable report of a precision rifle. Not wildfire, not suppression. Clean. Controlled. One shot. The enemy machine gunner ripping our position apart dropped where he stood. Another shot. His spotter collapsed beside him. A third round rang out, and the man directing the assault pitched backward like his strings had been cut. There was a neat, dark hole where his forehead had been. "My God," Daniel breathed, barely louder than a whisper. I stared into the thick green wall of the jungle, trying to spot the shooter. Whoever this woman was, she was operating on a level I had almost never seen before. Every round she fired found a target my guys could not even spot. It was unreal. Threats just vanished, one by one, taken out with a level of accuracy that felt almost unnatural, like someone was reaching into the fight and switching enemies off. Then her voice came back over the radio, steady as ever. "Ground Team Alpha, I am counting 25 hostile fighters in your immediate area. Give me 2 minutes, and whatever you do, do not fire on the person coming up behind you at your 6 o'clock position. That is me." 25 enemy fighters, and she was planning to handle them alone. Before I get into who she was, or how she pulled off something that should not have been possible, let me say this. Drop a comment telling us where you are watching from, and hit subscribe. Because what happened over the next 8 minutes would turn into a legend inside the Special Operations world. It would be remembered as the day a single sniper saved an entire SEAL team. The day everyone learned that sometimes the deadliest person on the battlefield is the one you never even know is there. 48 hours earlier, Emily Hart had been sitting in a briefing room at a classified location, listening to people who had never heard a shot fired in anger explain to her how to do her job. At 29 years old, she had already learned that this was just how it went. Let them talk, let them believe they were in control, then go out and do what actually needed to be done. "Your assignment is strictly reconnaissance and observation," the operations officer said, tapping a map of the jungle with a pointer. "You will be inserted 12 kilometers from the target compound. Establish an observation post. Track enemy movement. Report what you see. That is all. No direct action unless it is absolutely required for self-defense." Emily nodded, took neat notes, and played the role perfectly. She looked like a compliant contractor who would follow every instruction exactly as given. Inside, she was already thinking ahead. She had been in this line of work long enough to know that missions labeled reconnaissance almost never stayed that way once boots hit hostile ground. Plans fell apart. Intelligence failed. People started dying. On paper, her title was Military Intelligence Contractor, Field Analyst. In reality, her work was far more complex than that. Emily was what the intelligence community called a singleton operator. She worked alone, deep inside denied territory, collecting information that no satellite or drone could ever provide. She spoke 4 languages without an accent. She could navigate using nothing but the stars overhead. She had survived in some of the harshest places on Earth with only her training and her instincts to keep her alive. But what truly set her apart, what made certain agencies keep her number saved and ready, was her skill with a rifle. More specifically, her ability to hit targets at distances most snipers would not even attempt. Distances they would call impossible. She learned how to shoot from her grandfather, a Marine sniper from the Vietnam era. He drilled one lesson into her early and never let it go. Pulling the trigger was the easy part. That was maybe 10% of the job. The rest came down to reading the wind, judging distance, and having the patience to wait for the right moment instead of forcing a bad shot. By the time she was 15, she was beating grown men at long-range shooting competitions. Not just holding her own, but outperforming them. By 20, she had been quietly recruited by an organization that officially did not exist, to carry out missions that were never supposed to be acknowledged by anyone. The briefing wrapped up the way they always did. Long reminders about rules of engagement, operational security, and the importance of sticking to protocols. Emily smiled, shook hands with the people in the room, and walked out like she had every intention of doing exactly what they told her. Back in her quarters, she started getting ready. Not that there was much to do. Her gear had already been packed. Her rifle was custom-built and broken down into smaller components, designed to fit neatly inside a plain hiking backpack that would not draw attention. She carried match-grade ammunition, each round carefully selected by hand to ensure consistency. She had the pieces of a ghillie suit that could be blended with local plants once she was on the ground, water purification tablets, an emergency medical kit, a satellite phone with encrypted communications, and a sidearm she hoped she would never have to use, but never went without. She went over the maps one last time. Every ridge, every waterway, every terrain feature burned into memory. She marked possible observation sites and mapped out both primary and alternate routes in case something went wrong. The insertion point sat deep under triple canopy jungle, the kind of place where visibility dropped to just a few meters and moving in the wrong direction for too long could get you completely lost. In that terrain, navigation was less about landmarks and more about instinct and experience. The helicopter insertion was scheduled for Yotu 30 hours. Low altitude, high speed, no lights. The pilot would use the terrain and night vision to stay hidden. Emily had done insertions like this dozens of times, but it never became routine. Every flight carried risk, enemy fire, mechanical failure, one mistake that could send the aircraft crashing into the jungle below. This time, everything went clean. The helicopter flared just long enough for her to step off into waist-high grass. Then it vanished into the darkness, rotors fading until they blended into the natural sounds of the jungle. She was alone. 12 kilometers from the target, in a country that would deny she ever existed if she was captured. Perfect. She moved through the jungle slowly and silently, using terrain and thick vegetation to hide her movement. She stopped often, listening, feeling, making sure she was not walking into an ambush. At night, the jungle never shut up. Insects buzzed, animals moved through the undergrowth, leaves rustled in the wind. Telling the difference between natural sounds and human ones was a skill that took years to learn, and only seconds to lose if you got careless. It took her 6 hours to cover those 12 kilometers and reach her planned observation position. She moved the way she always did in hostile ground. Slow, deliberate, no wasted steps. She stayed off trails, stayed away from anything that hinted at human traffic, and kept herself buried in the thickest vegetation she could find. The deeper and uglier the jungle got, the safer she felt. Eventually, she found it. A ridgeline that overlooked the valley below, with the target compound sitting right in the middle like it was on display. From up there, she had clean sight lines, solid natural cover, and more than one way out if things went sideways. It was about as good as a position could get. She put her rifle together piece by piece, slow and quiet. Then she built a hide using branches, leaves, and whatever the jungle gave her. Once everything blended in, she settled behind the glass and started watching. Almost immediately, she knew the intel was bad. She counted at least 50 fighters moving around the compound. Not 30. 50. And they were not sloppy or disorganized. These men were armed well, moved with discipline, and ran patrols like they knew exactly what they were doing. This was not some loose militia guarding a shack in the jungle. This was a trained force. She sent her report through the encrypted satellite phone. Short, clipped phrases, just the facts. Enough to paint a clear picture, but not enough to compromise anything if someone happened to be listening. The response came back quickly. Acknowledged. No concern. The SEAL mission was still on. That was when she felt it. That tight feeling in her gut that she had learned to trust. Something was off. The intelligence did not line up with what she was seeing through her scope. The enemy presence was heavier, stronger, better prepared. The SEALs were walking into something that could turn ugly fast. But she was not in charge. She was an observer. Her job was to watch and report, and she had done exactly that. What happened next was someone else's call. Still, she could not shake the feeling that she was watching a disaster take shape, one slow step at a time. The SEAL team went in the following night. From her position, she watched the helicopters come in low and fast, barely clearing the treetops. They dropped the 12-man team at the edge of the jungle and vanished back into the darkness before anyone could react. Through her thermal optic, she tracked the team as they moved through the dense brush. 12 heat signatures, steady and controlled, flowing forward with the confidence of men who had trained for this kind of work their entire lives. The initial assault went exactly by the book. Breaching charges blew doors apart. Flashbangs lit up the compound and stunned anyone inside. Short, controlled bursts of gunfire dropped targets cleanly. From her vantage point, it looked flawless. Then everything went to hell. Gunfire erupted from hidden positions surrounding the compound. Machine guns opened up. Rifles joined in. Rocket-propelled grenades streaked through the air. The compound had never been the objective. It was the bait, and the SEALs had taken it. Enemy fighters flooded in from every direction, closing fast, trying to encircle and wipe out the American team. Emily watched as the SEALs fought their way out of the compound, moving hard and fast toward a position they could defend. They were doing everything right. Every movement was sharp. Every decision was solid. But even the best operators in the world could only do so much. They were outnumbered at least 5-1, maybe more. Enemy fighters kept pouring out of the jungle like it had no bottom. One group after another, all armed, all moving with purpose, all trying to wrap around the SEAL team and crush them. Over the radio, I could hear it all unfolding. The urgent calls for help, the clipped replies, and, finally, the hard truth nobody wanted to say out loud. Support was too far away. Nobody was coming in time. This was the point where she was supposed to stay invisible, hold position, protect her cover. She was reconnaissance, not an assault element. Stepping in would burn her mission and put a massive target on her back. Emily made her choice in about 3 seconds. "Forget that," she muttered under her breath as she settled deeper into her firing position. She had already been working the problem since the shooting started. Distances, angles, priority targets, order of engagement. The SEALs were roughly 800 meters out, dug into a shallow depression bordered by fallen logs and broken terrain. Enemy fighters were advancing from 3 sides, moving with coordinated fire and maneuver that screamed professional training. Her eyes went first to the left flank. A machine gun team had set up there and was doing real damage. They were hammering the SEAL position non-stop, pinning the Americans in place while other fighters tried to move around them. Through her scope, she picked them up. The gunner and his assistant were tucked in behind a downed tree, partially concealed, confident in their position. Emily slowed her breathing, let her heart rate drop. She felt the air on her skin and measured the wind without thinking about it. The jungle humidity mattered. So did the slight breeze moving from right to left. She ran the math in her head. Distance, drift, elevation. She needed to hold a little high and a little left. She let out a slow breath and squeezed the trigger. The rifle kicked into her shoulder, solid and familiar. Through the glass, she watched the machine gunner's head snap back as if yanked by a rope. His body went slack instantly. The assistant froze. Just for a moment. Long enough to register that something was wrong. That moment was all she needed. Her second shot dropped him before he could even move his hands. She shifted immediately to her next priority. On the right flank, an enemy squad leader was directing the attack, using hand signals to move his men into position for a final push. He was the glue holding that assault together. Emily centered her reticle and sent a round straight into his chest. He went down hard, and with him went the coordination of the entire squad. Men hesitated. Movements stalled. Orders stopped flowing. That was when she keyed her radio and finally made herself known to the SEALs. The effect was instant. Enemy fighters began dropping with no visible source of fire. Confusion spread fast. Squad leaders shouted. Fighters hesitated, unsure where the shots were coming from or who was being targeted next. The advance slowed, then faltered, and in that brief window of uncertainty the SEALs seized the moment. They popped up behind cover and returned fire with fresh aggression, exploiting the enemy's sudden loss of momentum. What had been a desperate defense started to shift, driven by the chaos Emily had just unleashed. Emily went to work like she had done 100 times before, calm and systematic. She did not rush. She did not waste rounds. She followed a strict order. Leaders first, the men giving commands and moving pieces on the board. After that, anyone behind a heavy weapon, machine guns, rocket launchers, mortar teams, anyone who could rack up bodies fast. Only then did she focus on exposed fighters who posed an immediate danger to the SEAL position. Every trigger pull was intentional. Nothing was random. She accounted for the wind, the distance, the thick humidity hanging in the air, the angle of the slope beneath her, even the way each target moved when they thought no one was watching. This was not panic fire. This was not desperation. This was precision shooting at the highest level. Each shot was the result of dozens of calculations made in a heartbeat. Her fourth target was a rocket gunner lifting his launcher toward the SEALs. She caught him mid-motion, just as the weapon reached his shoulder. The rocket detonated right there, killing him instantly and taking out 2 fighters standing too close. Her fifth shot went to a man acting as a spotter for mortar fire. He was on a radio, calmly feeding coordinates that would have dropped explosives straight onto the Americans. Emily's round hit just below his ear. The radio fell silent. The mortars never fired again. She was locked in now, fully inside that narrow mental space where nothing else existed. Time stretched out. Every detail sharpened. She felt the heavy air on her skin. The solid weight of the rifle pressed into her shoulder. The faint movement of leaves that told her which way the wind was shifting. The glowing heat signatures of enemy fighters slipping through the jungle. Targets 6 through 10 fell quickly. An enemy sniper who had started searching for her position. A squad leader trying to rally his men for another push. 3 fighters moving into a flanking position that would have given them clean shots on the SEALs. By the time she fired her 11th round, the enemy was coming apart. They had a rough idea of where the shots were coming from, but rough did not cut it. She was 800 meters out, buried in thick jungle, firing from a spot that gave her perfect visibility while keeping her almost invisible. Enemy fighters started spraying bullets in her general direction. Wild, unfocused, useless. Panic had set in, exactly as she hoped. Panicked fighters made bad choices. They broke cover. They forgot their training. She kept going. Target 12 was a fighter with a radio, likely calling for reinforcements. He dropped before he could finish the transmission. Target 13 was another machine gunner trying to pin the SEALs down. 1 round ended that problem. Target 14 was a small group attempting to throw smoke grenades and advance under cover. She shut that down before the smoke could even spread. By then, the SEALs knew what they had. Someone was watching over them. With that confidence, they began to move harder and faster, pushing, repositioning, and returning fire with purpose, finally able to take advantage of the chaos Emily had carved into the enemy lines. The SEALs took full advantage of the opening she had given them. They laid down suppressive fire, pushed the enemy back, and started moving their wounded to safer ground. Over the radio, Emily could hear the shift in their voices. The panic was gone. In its place was calm resolve. These men were back in the fight, but it was not finished yet. New enemy fighters were pouring in from the direction of the main compound. Fresh bodies, fresh weapons. Emily counted at least 15 more hostiles moving into the fight. Some of them wore tactical vests and carried gear that screamed professional military training. These were not desperate locals. These were trained fighters. She keyed her radio. Ground Team Alpha, new enemy element moving in from your 3 o'clock. Squad-sized force, possible heavy weapons. I am engaging. She shifted her rifle toward the incoming reinforcements. These fighters moved differently, slower, smarter, using cover, bounding forward with discipline. But caution only helped so much when the threat was invisible and impossible to locate. Target 15 went down trying to sprint across a small clearing. Target 16 dropped while giving hand signals from behind a tree. Targets 17 and 18 fell almost back-to-back when they stepped out to set up a machine gun. They never got the chance. She was burning ammunition now. Not recklessly, but steadily. Every round removed another threat. Every shot bought the SEALs more time. Her shoulder throbbed from repeated recoil. Her eyes burned after hours behind the scope, but her hands did not shake. Her breathing stayed slow and controlled. Her focus never broke. Target 19 was moving alone, trying to slip around the SEAL position from an unexpected angle. Emily tracked him through her thermal optic, patient, waiting. When he stopped to check his bearings, she fired once. He folded into the brush without a sound. Target 20 was yelling, trying to pull what was left of the assault back together, shouting orders, demanding movement. Emily ended that effort with a single round that cut him off mid-command. The enemy was coming apart now. She could see it in their body language. Movements grew hesitant. Aggression faded. Fighters started looking for cover and escape instead of angles of attack. The kill zone they had prepared for the SEALs had turned on them. Targets 21 through 23 fell as they attempted to lay down covering fire for a retreat. Target 24 went down while trying to grab the fallen commander's radio. Target 25, the last immediate danger to the SEAL team, dropped while maneuvering into what he thought would be a firing position on the Americans. And then, just like that, it stopped. The jungle fell quiet. The enemy fighters who were still alive broke and ran. They dropped weapons where they stood and vanished into the jungle, melting back into the trees they had poured out of only minutes earlier. The non-stop gunfire that had dominated the last 10 minutes suddenly stopped. In its place came the normal sounds of the jungle returning to life. Insects buzzing, birds calling, leaves shifting in the breeze. Emily stayed right where she was, rifle up, eyes scanning. She did not relax yet. She swept the area carefully, watching for any sign that the enemy might regroup and try one last push. But her thermal optic told the story clearly. Heat signatures were moving away fast, disorganized, scattered. The retreat was real. They were done. She keyed her radio. "Ground Team Alpha, enemy forces are retreating. Your position is secure. I am moving to your location. Do not shoot me." The reply came back heavy with exhaustion and relief. "Copy that. We have you on thermals. Move in. And, ma'am, I do not know who you are, but you just saved 12 lives today." Emily broke down her hide with practiced efficiency. She gathered her spent brass, policing every casing. Leaving evidence behind was sloppy, and she was not sloppy. Once finished, she started toward the SEAL position. She moved slowly and deliberately, making enough noise to announce herself. Her rifle stayed pointed toward the ground, her posture non-threatening. After everything that had just happened, the last thing she needed was to survive the firefight only to get taken out by friendly fire. When she stepped out of the jungle and into their position, every SEAL turned and stared at her. 12 of the most elite fighters America had, all looking at her like she had appeared out of thin air. From their point of view, she basically had. Chief Marcus stood out immediately. He was a big man, 6 feet of muscle wrapped in tactical gear, with a thick beard that made him look like something out of a Viking saga. He studied her the way professionals do, taking in her compact build, the custom rifle slung across her back, and the ghillie suit components still clinging to her gear. "You are the shooter?" he asked. His voice said he was still trying to process what his eyes were telling him. "I am the shooter," Emily replied. "How many did you take out?" 2 confirmed, possibly more. Hard to say with the ones behind cover. A younger SEAL, corporal stripes on his sleeve, shook his head slowly. "Ma'am, I have been shooting my whole adult life. I am a designated marksman. And what you just did, I do not even know what to call that. That was beyond human." Emily shrugged slightly. "Training and repetition. And good timing. You all were about to have a very bad day." "We were about to have our last day," Marcus said flatly. "If you had not stepped in when you did, we would be calling for body bags instead of extraction." He held out his hand. "Chief Petty Officer Marcus Marcus." She took it. "Emily Hart," she said, "military intelligence contractor." She shook his hand, noting the sheer strength in his grip and the genuine gratitude shining in his eyes. "Contractor?" another SEAL asked, his tone laced with skepticism. "What kind of contractor goes in alone, deep in hostile territory and shoots like a Delta Force sniper?" "The kind they call when situations go sideways like this," Emily replied evenly. She didn't flinch at the doubt. She had lived with it her entire career, the unspoken assumption that because she was young and female she couldn't possibly match the skill her record claimed. She'd long since learned to let her actions do the talking. Daniel, the SEAL who had been relaying enemy positions during the fight, stepped forward. His eyes held a new respect. "Ma'am," he said, voice low but firm, "I've worked with some of the best snipers in the military. And what you just pulled, engaging multiple targets at that range, in these conditions, under fire, that's world class. Where'd you train?" "Here and there," Emily said, deliberately vague. Truth was, her training came from everywhere. Military schools, private instruction from retired special operations snipers, thousands of hours of practice and real-world experience in places that never showed up on any official record. But that wasn't something she shared casually. "Right now, we focus on getting you guys out of here," she added. "This area is going to heat up once the enemy regroups and calls in backup." Rix nodded, already keying his radio. "Ghost 6, Ground Team Alpha. Hostile contact broken. Area secure for extraction. We also have one additional friendly, one contractor who just saved our asses. We'll need one extra seat on the bird." The reply came back fast. "Ground Team Alpha, copy additional passenger. Extraction helicopters inbound. Estimated time of arrival, 12 minutes. Move to primary landing zone." "Roger, moving now," Rick said, looking over his team. "You heard the man. Let's move. Jason Carter, carry the wounded. Everyone else maintain tactical spacing. Watch our flanks. Ms. Hart, you're with me. I want you where I can see you, not because I don't trust you, but because I don't want to accidentally leave behind the person who just saved our lives." The SEALs moved through the jungle with precision, a machine-like efficiency born of endless training. Despite exhaustion and injuries, the team carried 2 men, both conscious but unable to walk. The rest maintained security, scanning constantly for any sign that the enemy might return. Emily moved alongside them, rifle up, eyes sweeping the undergrowth. The firefight was over, but they weren't safe yet. She knew all too well that the last moments after a battle could be the most dangerous, when fatigue and relief caused even the best operators to slip for just a second. The landing zone was nothing more than a rough break in the trees, a cramped patch of ground that barely qualified as a clearing. The SEALs fanned out immediately, forming a tight defensive ring, weapons trained on the jungle walls as if daring them to move. Emily slid into a firing position that overlapped cleanly with the team's machine guns. If the enemy decided to make a final push during extraction, she wanted every lane of fire covered. "Contact left," a SEAL yelled. Her rifle was already up, moving, locked in, before the words fully registered. Through her scope, she caught sight of 3 fighters pushing out of the vegetation, leftovers from the earlier firefight, reckless enough to try one last strike. Her first round dropped the lead man instantly, center mass, before his weapon ever came up. The second fighter managed to squeeze off a short burst of automatic fire, rounds tearing harmlessly through leaves and dirt. Emily's follow-up shot cut him down mid-motion. The third man dove for cover, throwing himself toward a fallen log. Emily didn't hesitate. She'd already predicted where he would land. Her third shot hit just as he tried to scramble behind the wood. "Clear," she said calmly, lowering her rifle. The SEALs looked at her, stunned. Again. "Jesus Christ," Daniel muttered. "Does she ever miss?" "Not that I've seen," Marcus answered, "and I'm starting to think we seriously need to rethink what we call a contractor." Moments later, the thump of rotor blades tore through the air. 2 Blackhawk helicopters came in hard and low, door gunners sweeping the perimeter as they flared into the clearing. The extraction was flawless, fast, disciplined by the book. The wounded were loaded first and secured. Head counts were done twice. No one moved without confirmation. Emily boarded last, taking a spot near the open door, rifle angled outward in case the jungle decided to wake up again. As the helicopter lifted off, banking away from the trees and accelerating toward open air, she finally let herself ease up just a fraction. Not relax, she never truly relaxed in a combat zone, but enough to recognize that the immediate threat was over. Marcus sat across from her, watching with an expression that mixed gratitude and professional curiosity. His voice came through her headset, clear despite the roar of the engines. "Miss Hart, when we get back, a lot of people are going to want a word with you. Debriefs, after-action reports, probably medals and commendations." "I'd rather skip all that," Emily said without hesitation. "I work best when people don't know who I am or what I do." "I get it," Marcus replied, "but you just saved 12 SEALs. That kind of thing doesn't disappear." Emily met his gaze. "Then let's compromise. I told them I would give a full debrief for operational reasons, but I made one thing clear right away. My name did not belong in any official paperwork. They could credit the support to local assets, an intelligence contractor, or any vague label that kept me invisible. I worked better that way. When people did not know who I was, I stayed effective." Ryan took a moment to think it through. Then he nodded. He said he could probably make that arrangement happen. Still, he warned me his team knew exactly who I was, and they were not going to stay quiet about what happened. Maybe they would leave my name out of it, but the story itself was going to spread. What happened out there was the kind of thing people talked about for years. A sniper appearing out of nowhere, an ambush collapsing, a massacre turning into a rescue. That kind of story does not just disappear. I told him I could live with it as long as the legend stayed separate from my real identity. As the helicopter carried us away, I looked out through the open door at the jungle shrinking beneath us. Somewhere down there, the enemy fighters were pulling themselves together. They were counting bodies, filing reports, trying to understand how their flawless plan had unraveled so fast. They would replay it again and again, searching for answers they would never find. I hoped they kept wondering. Confusion had always been one of my strongest tools. The debrief happened inside a secure facility that officially did not exist. On maps, the area was labeled disputed territory, nothing more. Everyone in the room knew better. It was a covert operations base, buried deep in the jungle and sealed off from the outside world. I sat across the table from Colonel Jonathan Prescott, an intelligence officer who had spent 20 years in special operations. His face showed the kind of calm that only comes from a lifetime in dangerous places. Ryan sat to my right, still wearing his combat gear. He refused to leave. He said he was staying until he personally made sure I received proper acknowledgement for what I had done. The colonel scrolled through reports on his tablet, then looked up at me. "Miss Hart," he said, "I have been reviewing Chief Hendrick's account of today's engagement. I will be honest with you. The numbers are difficult to accept." I told him they were correct. 25 confirmed enemy casualties. 1 shooter. Distances beyond 800 meters. Dense jungle. Active combat conditions. He shook his head slowly and said he had worked with some of the finest snipers the military had ever trained. What he was reading, what Ryan was confirming, pushed right up against the limits of what a human being should be able to do. I explained it plainly. I said the conditions favored me. I had clear sight lines from my position. Thermal optics allowed me to track targets through heavy vegetation. Most important, the enemy was completely focused on the SEAL team. They never thought to look where I was. All of those factors came together at the same moment. For me, it was an ideal engagement. For them, it was a disaster. The colonel leaned back in his chair and studied me in silence, like he was deciding whether the explanation made him more impressed or more uneasy. The colonel studied me for a long second, then said he needed to understand my background. According to my file, I was listed as a civilian contractor with a focus on intelligence analysis. But what he was seeing in the reports did not line up with that description at all. The results looked more like the work of Tier 1 Special Operations personnel, not someone who was supposed to live behind a desk. I was about to answer him when the entire facility came alive in the worst possible way. Alarms exploded overhead, sharp and relentless. Red emergency lights snapped on and began flashing through the corridors, bathing everything in a deep crimson glow that made the place feel suddenly unreal. The colonel's radio burst into noise, overlapping voices cutting each other off. Someone finally broke through. "Sir, we have an active situation. Enemy assault force inbound from multiple directions. Estimated strength is 40 to 50 hostiles. They are heavily armed and moving with coordinated tactics. Distance to the perimeter is approximately 800 meters and closing fast." I watched the blood drain from the colonel's face. This base was never supposed to be found. Its protection came from isolation, secrecy, and tight operational discipline. An enemy attack here was not just dangerous, it was catastrophic. Inside these walls were maps, communication systems, personnel lists, and classified intelligence that laid bare the scope of American operations in the region. If this place fell, the damage would ripple far beyond everyone in the room. The colonel did not panic. He straightened and gave orders with a steady voice. "Lock the facility down. Arm all personnel and move them into defensive positions. Call for quick reaction force support immediately." The response came back fast and ugly. "Sir, quick reaction force is at least 25 minutes out. Weather conditions are deteriorating. Air support may not be possible." The colonel turned to the tactical display mounted on the wall. Red icons were sliding inward, closing from 3 separate directions like a tightening fist. "How many people here can actually fight?" he asked. 15 total, sir. Only 5 with recent combat experience. The rest are support staff. Intelligence analysts, communication specialists, medical personnel." Hendricks checked his weapon beside me, his expression grim. "My team is on site," he said, "but we are operating at maybe 60% effectiveness. We are wounded, exhausted, and low on ammunition." That was when my mindset shifted completely. The debrief was over. The fight was coming. I stood up without thinking and moved toward the tactical display. Terrain replaced paperwork in my head. Angles, distance, cover, movement. I studied the surrounding jungle, the approach routes, the defensive layout of the facility. "Colonel," I said, "I need full topographical data. Elevation changes, vegetation density, natural choke points, anything that can slow or channel their movement." He started to say something about my status as a civilian contractor, about procedures and command structure. I cut him off. "Sir, with respect, there is no time for that. That enemy force will be in effective assault range in 10 minutes. We either prepare now, or we get overrun." The room went quiet as everyone realized the same thing. This was no longer a question of titles or paperwork. It was about surviving what was coming next. "We need to establish a defense," I said, keeping my voice level. "And we need to do it immediately." Colonel Prescott paused, just for a heartbeat. Then he gave a short nod. "Show her everything," he ordered. "Miss Hart, what do you need?" I leaned in toward the tactical display, studying it closely. My fingers moved across the screen as I traced possible firing positions, quietly running distance calculations in my head, measuring angles, lines of sight, and approach speeds. The facility was carved into the side of a hill. Thick jungle wrapped around 3 sides, while the 4th side had been intentionally cleared to create a controlled approach. That clearing was both a weakness and an opportunity. The jungle itself offered natural choke points where the vegetation thinned. There were also elevated positions nearby that provided clean sight lines if you knew where to look. "I need to operate outside the perimeter," I said. "I will take a high position with clear visibility over their approach routes. Same method as before. Long-range engagement." I looked at the red icons closing in. "I will disrupt their coordination, take out leadership and heavy weapons, and slow them down until your quick reaction force arrives." One of the officers turned sharply toward me. "That is a suicide mission," he said. "You would be completely alone, behind enemy movement, with no support and no extraction plan." I shook my head. "I will be 800 to 1,000 meters from their assault elements," I said calmly. "I will be concealed in jungle terrain I have already scouted. They will not be able to easily locate me, and effective return fire will not be an option for them." I met his eyes. "That is not suicide. That is asymmetric warfare." Ricks stepped forward then. "Colonel," he said, "I have seen what she can do. If she says she can slow that force down, I believe her." He glanced at me, then back at Prescott. "My team will stay on the perimeter. We will shape the cleared approaches into a kill zone. She targets leadership and heavy weapons. We deal with anyone who makes it through." He exhaled. "It is not a perfect plan, but it beats getting wiped out." The colonel stared at me for several long seconds, weighing options that no commander ever wants to face. Finally, he gave a single nod. "Do it," he said. "But if the situation turns bad, you disengage immediately. We cannot afford to lose someone with your capabilities over a facility that can be rebuilt." "Understood, sir." I moved fast after that. Extra ammunition, gear check, weapon confirmed. No wasted motion. As I passed Ricks near the exit, he reached out and caught my arm. "Hey," he said quietly. "You do not owe us this. You already saved our people today. Nobody would fault you for sitting this one out." I looked at him and shook my head. "This has nothing to do with owing anyone," I said. "There are people in that facility who cannot defend themselves. Support staff, analysts, medics. They never signed up for a firefight." I paused, then added, "Keeping them alive is reason enough." I slipped through a camouflaged side exit and disappeared into the jungle, moving fast but silent, already shifting my focus to terrain, timing, and the fight that was about to begin. Behind me, I could hear the SEALs getting organized. Their voices stayed steady and controlled, like this was just another drill instead of a worst-case scenario. These guys had already lived through one fight today that should have killed them. Now they were calmly setting up to face another. I reached my planned position in under 5 minutes. It was a rocky outcrop halfway up a hillside, roughly 900 meters from the facility and about 20 meters above the valley floor. From there, I had a clear view of the approach routes, looking straight down into the terrain the enemy would have to cross. Solid rock gave me natural protection, and the surrounding brush helped break up my outline. I worked fast. I pulled vegetation into place, shaping a quick hide, then settled into a stable firing position. Once everything felt right, I brought the rifle up and started scanning through my scope. That was when I realized the situation was worse than expected. Using thermal optics, I counted at least 55 enemy fighters. They were not moving randomly. They were broken into organized elements, squads of 8 to 10, advancing with discipline and spacing. Their movement was deliberate. Fire and maneuver techniques, proper intervals, silent hand signals. These were not amateurs. This was a coordinated military assault. I keyed my radio. "Command, this is Overwatch. I am set. I count approximately 55 hostiles. 5 assault squads plus a command element. They are 300 meters from your perimeter and closing. Beginning engagement." The response came back immediately. "Overwatch, this is command. You are cleared hot. Watch your lanes. Friendly elements may be forward." I shifted focus to target priority. The first man I looked for was the one running the show. He stood slightly behind the main body, surrounded by radio operators and officers. Even without insignia, his role was obvious. He was pointing, issuing orders, coordinating movement across multiple directions. If he went down, their command and control would collapse. I ran the numbers. Distance, 920 meters. Wind, light crosswind from the east. Humidity, high. Temperature, falling as the sun dropped behind the mountains. I made my adjustments, slowed my breathing, and let the rifle settle. Then I squeezed. The commander dropped where he stood. Instant chaos. The men around him scattered, suddenly unsure of what to do next. I did not give them time to recover. Second shot. The nearest officer trying to take charge went down. Third shot. A radio operator fell, his call for guidance cut short. The entire assault stalled. Squad leaders turned back toward the command element that no longer existed, searching for orders that were never coming. That hesitation was all I needed. I shifted my scope forward to the lead assault teams. Target 4 was a heavy machine gunner moving into position to lay down suppressive fire. Target 5 was his ammunition carrier. 2 quick shots. Both of them dropped seconds apart. The enemy attack had just lost its momentum, and I was only getting started. My next targets came fast. Number 6 was a squad leader pushing his people forward, pointing them into assault positions. Number 7 was a rocket launcher gunner setting up for a shot on the facility. Number 8 was a sniper who had taken an overwatch position of his own. He was good, but he was looking the wrong way, scanning for threats from the compound instead of from my direction. He never saw me. By my 10th shot, the attack had ground to a halt. The enemy fighters stopped advancing and started dropping into cover. I could see the confusion ripple through them as leaders and heavy weapons went down without warning. Some of them fired back, but it was useless. They sprayed rounds into the jungle with no idea where the threat actually was, burning ammunition on empty ground. I stayed focused. Target 11 was another squad leader trying to pull his people together. Target 12 carried a radio and was likely attempting to reach the main force for guidance or reinforcements. Both went down. Targets 13 and 14 were smarter. They tried to use a ravine to flank the facility under cover. I followed them through thermal imaging, tracking their heat signatures as they moved below the canopy. I waited. When they finally stepped out of the ravine and into open ground, I took them both down before either could take 3 full steps. I keyed my radio. Command, Overwatch. Enemy assault has stopped advancing. They are taking defensive positions roughly 200 meters from your perimeter. There was a pause. Then the colonel came back on the line. Copy that, Overwatch. Whatever you are doing, it is effective. Roger, I said. I am shifting fire to prevent reorganization. Stand by. I scanned again, slower now. That was when I saw what they were trying to do. Small groups were forming. Men were pointing, gesturing, trying to pull order out of chaos. New leaders were stepping up, attempting to rebuild command and control so they could launch another push. I did not allow it. Anyone giving orders became a priority. Anyone coordinating movement did not last long. Anyone trying to turn panic into a plan was removed before the plan could take shape. Target 15 was a senior fighter, likely an officer who had moved forward to take charge. Target 16 was setting up a heavy machine gun on a tripod. Target 17 carried another rocket launcher. Target 18 was a sniper who finally realized the fire was not coming from the facility. He began searching the hillside, trying to locate me for a countershot. He never got close. By then, the assault was falling apart. I could see it in the way they moved. The aggression was gone. Their posture changed. They stayed low, hugged cover, glanced over their shoulders. They were no longer thinking about attacking. They were thinking about surviving and finding a way out. They had expected an easy victory, a quick strike against a lightly defended site. Instead, they were being dismantled one by an enemy they could not see, could not pinpoint, and could not fight on equal terms. Still, I did not relax. Fights like this rarely end cleanly, and I knew it was not over yet. I had a bad feeling it was not finished. Forces this size almost always had contingencies, backup elements, commanders who did not quit just because the first plan failed. That instinct proved right. My radio crackled again. Overwatch, command, new contacts. Second enemy element moving in from the east. Estimate 2 Zero fighters attempting to flank the facility. I swung the rifle immediately, shifting my focus to the new approach vector. Through the scope, I picked them up fast. A fresh squad, moving carefully, trying to take advantage of the chaos I had already created. It was a smart move. If they reached the facility's flank, they would have clean shots into the defensive positions. That could not happen. Target 19 was easy to spot. He was the one giving hand signals, controlling their movement. I took him first. Target 20 followed right after, his second in command, stepping forward without hesitation. Then I went to work on the weapons. Targets 21 through 23 carried the tools that made them dangerous: a machine gun, a rocket launcher, and what looked like a demolition charge meant for breaching. All of them went down in quick succession. The flanking element collapsed instantly. Without leadership and without heavy weapons, the remaining fighters broke and ran, disappearing back into the jungle. I tracked them through the scope as they fled, but I did not fire again. They were no longer a threat, and I needed to preserve ammunition for anything still coming. I shifted back to the main assault force. They were pulling out now. Men dragged their wounded. Others tried to carry their dead. A few laid down covering fire as they retreated, firing blindly toward the facility while backing into the trees. I let most of them go. They were finished, no longer combat effective, but I stayed selective. Anyone trying to organize a rear guard, anyone attempting to slow the defenders or set conditions for a final push. Those people did not get a second chance. Target 24 was setting up to provide covering fire for the withdrawal. Target 25 was another squad leader trying to form a defensive line. Target 26 carried a radio and was almost certainly calling for reinforcements or indirect fire support. All three were removed. I keyed the radio. Command, Overwatch, enemy forces are withdrawing. Repeat, hostiles are breaking contact and retreating. Estimated 30 enemy killed in action. Unknown number wounded. Assault has been stopped completely. The response came back, steady and calm. You shut them down, the colonel said. You stopped the assault cold. I stayed on the scope, sweeping slowly, watching the jungle for any sign of regrouping. But the thermal picture told the story. Heat signatures were moving away fast, scattered and uncoordinated. No formations, no leadership, just panic and retreat. The fight was over. Command, Overwatch, I said. Enemy has fully withdrawn. I am holding position until the quick reaction force arrives in case they attempt to reorganize. Recommend maintaining heightened alert. Roger, Overwatch. Quick reaction force inbound. Estimated time of arrival, 10 minutes. There was a brief pause before the colonel spoke again. And, Miss Hart, he added, I do not know what we did to deserve having you here today, but thank you. You just saved everyone in this facility. I stayed behind the rifle, eyes on the jungle, listening to my breathing and waiting for the sound of rotors in the distance. Just in case. I stayed where I was. I watched. I waited. My shoulder throbbed from the rifle's recoil, a deep ache that had settled into the joint. My eyes burned after hours of staring through glass and thermal overlays. Still, I did not move. I stayed locked in, ready to re-engage the second anything shifted in the jungle. Nothing did. They did not come back. About 20 minutes later, I heard it. The low, unmistakable thump of helicopter rotors cutting through the air. The quick reaction force was inbound, heavy birds carrying soldiers geared for a full-scale fight. They arrived expecting chaos. Instead, they found silence, bodies scattered through the jungle, a facility still standing, and one exhausted contractor sitting on a hillside, calmly wiping down her rifle. Colonel Prescott walked out to my position himself. Ricks was with him, along with several other officers. The look on Prescott's face was hard to pin down. Part disbelief, part relief, part something close to awe. Miss Hart, he said, slowing as he approached, I just reviewed the initial casualty numbers. He glanced back toward the jungle. 26 confirmed enemy killed by a single shooter. Less than 35 minutes of sustained engagement. Against a coordinated assault force that should have overwhelmed this site. 27, sir, I said, nodding toward a shape half hidden in the undergrowth. That one was trying to get close enough to throw grenades. He followed my gaze, then exhaled. 27, he repeated, shaking his head. I do not even know how to process this. What you did today. First saving Chief Hendrick's team, then stopping an assault that would have wiped out this entire facility. He paused. In 20 years of special operations, I have never seen anything like it. I shrugged slightly. Just doing my job, sir. Ricks stepped forward immediately. No, he said. No, ma'am. That is not just doing your job. He looked around at the officers, then back at me. I have served with the best shooters in the SEAL teams, with special operations snipers who spent their entire careers refining this skill, and none of them could have done what you did today. He shook his head. Not once, and definitely not twice in the same day. Daniel walked up then, holding a spent brass casing between his fingers. He looked like a man trying to reconcile math with reality. Ma'am, he said, I have been mapping your shots based on entry wounds and angles. You were engaging targets anywhere from 800 meters to over 1,000 meters, in jungle terrain, limited visibility, moving targets, enemies actively taking cover. He let out a short breath. The precision required for that level of performance is almost impossible, and yet the evidence is right there. I gave a small nod. The conditions helped, I said. Elevation advantage, thermal optics, and they did not know where I was until it was already over. It sounds harder than it was. There was a short silence. Then one of the SEALs snorted. "Yeah," he said flatly. "I do not buy that for a second." I almost smiled. One of the operators shook his head and looked straight at me. "Ma'am, with respect," he said, "I am a designated marksman. I train constantly. The shots you are calling favorable conditions would be considered extremely difficult by any professional standard. You are talking about world record level shooting, like it is routine." Before I could respond, Colonel Prescott motioned back toward the facility. "Miss Hart," he said, "we need to finish your debrief. And this time, I need your full background. I need to understand how someone develops the capabilities you displayed today, because what I am seeing does not align with any training profile I recognize." We returned to the command center, and that was where the real work began. For the next 3 hours, I walked them through everything. Both engagements, shot by shot. Every decision, every adjustment, every mistake I avoided, and a few I barely corrected in time. Then I explained how I got there. I told them about competition shooting, starting when I was 8 years old, about long weekends on dusty ranges instead of playgrounds, about a Vietnam-era Marine sniper who took an interest in me early on and taught me fundamentals the hard way, with patience and zero tolerance for shortcuts. I talked about private instructors, contractors who specialized in things the military rarely had time to teach, years spent operating in denied territories where help was not coming and failure meant more than a bad evaluation. I explained my methods, the preparation, the custom-built equipment, my understanding of ballistics, wind, humidity, elevation, and how all of it changes under pressure. Thousands upon thousands of hours of deliberate practice, most of it alone. When I finished, the colonel leaned back slightly. "So, essentially," he said, "you are self-taught. No formal military sniper school." "I have attended several military schools as a contractor," I said, "but most of my skill development came from private instruction and self-directed training. I had the advantage of learning from different worlds, military doctrine, competitive shooting, international instructors." I paused. I took what worked and built my own system. He nodded slowly. "And your operational experience." "That came later," I said. "My file lists me as an intelligence analyst because that is my primary role. But intelligence work in denied areas often requires defensive capability. I developed those skills so I could operate independently in high-risk environments." Ryan spoke up then. "Colonel, with respect, does it really matter where she learned? She saved 23 American service members in the last 12 hours. That seems like the only metric that counts." The colonel did not disagree, but he did not let it go either. "It matters," he said, "because I need to know whether what she can do can be replicated, whether we can train other operators to this level, or whether Miss Hart represents a rare convergence of talent and circumstance that cannot be reproduced." I considered that for a moment before answering. "Probably the second one, sir," I said. "I had very specific advantages. I started young, I had exceptional mentors, I had access to time, ammunition, and resources without institutional limits, and I was never constrained by military bureaucracy when it came to how I trained." I met his eyes. That combination is extremely difficult to recreate inside a standard training pipeline. He made notes on his tablet, clearly already thinking past the room, past the facility, toward much larger implications. Finally, he looked up. "Miss Hart," he said, "what you did today will be classified at the highest levels." I nodded once. That part, at least, made perfect sense. There would be no medals, no ceremonies, no public mention, no official record anyone outside that room would ever see. The colonel was clear about that, but he also made sure I understood something else. He told me my actions had stopped a catastrophic loss of American lives and prevented a massive intelligence breach, that what happened here mattered, even if it would never be acknowledged publicly. I told him I appreciated that, but recognition was never the reason I stepped in. People needed help, and I had the ability to provide it. That was the whole calculation. He nodded slowly. That mindset, he said, is exactly why you are so valuable. Most people at your level want credit. They want their name attached to the outcome. You just want the work done. He paused. That is rare. When the debrief finally wrapped up, Rix asked if we could talk privately. We stepped away from the command center into a small courtyard, quiet and shaded, far from the constant movement inside. So, what now? He asked. You vanish back into whatever shadows you came from? I gave a small nod. Pretty much. I have a flight tomorrow, another assignment lined up already. This line of work does not leave much room for rest. He reached into a pocket and pulled something out. Before you go, I wanted you to have this. It was a challenge coin, custom-made, heavy, the kind only a unit would commission for its own people. This is from my team, he said. We talked it over. We want you to have it, as a thank you, and as proof that you have 12 brothers who would drop everything to back you up, anytime, anywhere. I took the coin and felt the weight of it in my hand. Challenge coins were sacred in the military. They could not be bought. They could not be faked. They were symbols of respect, earned through shared danger and trust. For a civilian to receive one from a SEAL team was almost unheard of. Thank you, Chief, I said quietly. This means a lot. It should, he replied. You earned it. He hesitated, then added, what you did today. Both fights. That is the kind of thing legends are built on. A sniper who appears out of nowhere and saves entire teams. I gave a half smile. As long as they leave my real name out of it, I am fine with that. The guardian angel, Daniel said from behind us. That is what we are calling you. The silent guardian watching over operators when things go bad. I actually smiled at that. I have had worse nicknames, I said. The team gathered then. All 12 SEALs who had survived the ambush. Bruised, bandaged, exhausted, but alive. They formed a loose circle around me, and Hendricks spoke for all of them. Ma'am, he said, between us we have about 80 years in the teams. We have worked alongside every special operations unit in the United States and more than a few foreign ones. We have seen world-class operators pull off things that should not have been possible. He met my eyes. And what you did today ranks among the most impressive combat performances any of us have ever witnessed. He gestured back toward the jungle and the facility beyond it. You saved our lives. Then you saved everyone here. I looked around the circle and nodded once. That was enough. We do not have words that are enough to thank you, Hendricks said, speaking for the team. But know this, you are one of us now. You might not wear the trident, but you have earned the respect that comes with it. Hooyah, the team said together, the traditional SEAL affirmation. I felt something I hadn't expected. Not quite pride, not exactly relief, but a sense of belonging. I had always worked alone. That was my choice, my comfort zone. But standing there, surrounded by warriors who understood what I had done and what it had cost me, I realized I was part of something bigger than myself. Hooyah, I replied. The smiles that spread across their faces were enough. Now, months later, I stood on a firing range at an undisclosed location, instructing a small group of military snipers on advanced techniques. Word of my last mission had spread through the special operations community, carefully sanitized, classified, but still the word was out. Occasionally, I got requests to teach, to pass on knowledge to elite units. My phone buzzed. Encrypted message. Guardian Angel, this is Ground Team Alpha. Situation developing that could use your particular skill set. Location, classified. Duration, unknown. Compensation, significant. Most importantly, Americans in trouble. Interested. I read it twice. My eyes flicked back to the range. My students were skilled, disciplined, capable shooters. They would benefit from my guidance, but not the way the people in that message needed me. I typed one word, inbound. Because that's what I did. That's who I was. The guardian angel. The mysterious sniper. The contractor nobody knew about. Until they did, at the exact moment they needed me most. Somewhere in the world, someone was in over their head. Someone facing impossible odds, waiting for help that might not come in time. I packed my gear. My rifle, custom-tuned and zeroed. Ammunition selected for precision. Tools and equipment honed through countless operations. I didn't know where I was going. Didn't know what I would face. Didn't know if it would be another mission that demanded everything I had. But I knew one thing with complete certainty. When I arrived, when I settled into position, when I looked through the scope and found my targets, someone's impossible day was about to get a lot better. The wolf doesn't announce itself to the sheep, but sometimes the wolf protects the sheep from predators they cannot see. I had made peace with being that wolf, the one who strikes from the shadows, who saves lives without asking for credit, who leaves no trace but the difference between life and death. It was enough. It was more than enough. It was everything. If this story moved you, subscribe for more tales of courage and extraordinary women making a difference. Every woman has a story worth telling. Join us and hear them.